Okay, let's talk about Brazil. For decades, it's been called the country of the future. But here's the thing. Has that future actually arrived? Is this a nation on the brink of becoming a true global leader, a powerhouse of green energy and tech? Or is it stuck in a loop, always held back by its own challenges? That's the big question we're digging into today.
To really get a handle on modern Brazil, you've got to look at the two completely different stories that are happening at the same time. On one side, you have the dream, right? This agricultural titan, a leader in clean energy, a place buzzing with tech startups. But then there's the flip side, the reality. A place where crippling bureaucracy, deep structural problems, and frankly, a massive infrastructure gap make things incredibly difficult.
So how do you square those two things? They seem worlds apart. In this explainer, we're going to break down both the promise and the peril. We'll use insights from CEOs, economists, and even people on the ground to try and figure out where Brazil really stands today.
First, let's make the case for Brazil. Let's look at all the reasons for optimism. Because the country has some truly incredible natural and strategic advantages that have a lot of very smart people, CEOs, investors, feeling like this could finally be Brazil's moment.
Let's start with energy. And just look at this number. An estimated 88% of Brazil's electricity comes from renewable sources. We're talking hydro, solar, wind, the whole shebang. To put that into perspective, that is the highest share of any major G20 economy. It gives them a massive head start in the race to decarbonize.
And check this out. Here's another huge strength. Brazil is basically sitting on a treasure trove of the exact minerals the world needs for the green energy transition. It's got the world's largest reserves of niobium, and get this, it produces a whopping 95% of the global supply. And it's not just that. It's also in the top 3 for graphite, nickel, and rare earths. You know, the stuff you absolutely need for electric vehicle batteries and wind turbines.
And you can bet business leaders are paying close attention. They see these green credentials as way more than just good PR. They see it as a serious competitive advantage. Ricardo Mussa, who chairs a sustainable business group, summed it up perfectly. He says all the fundamental pieces are already in place for Brazil to lead the way.
But look, this story isn't just about what's in the ground. With nearly everyone, 95% of the population, online every day, Brazil has built this incredibly dynamic digital scene. It's a top 10 country for billion-dollar startups, or unicorns. And this digital-first mindset led them to create Pix, an instant payment system that's been so successful other countries are literally studying it to figure out how to copy.
So yeah, the potential is just undeniable. But for every single argument for Brazil's rise, there's a powerful counterargument. We're talking about a set of deep-rooted, chronic problems that create enormous friction and just hold the country back.
And the best way to understand all that friction is through this one critical concept, custo Brazil, which literally means the Brazil cost. It's not just one thing. It's this messy combination of a ridiculously complex tax system, endless red tape, and logistical nightmares that all add up to make doing pretty much anything in the country uniquely expensive. And if you want to see the real-world impact of Custo Brazil boiled down to a single number, well, here it is. The World Bank ranks Brazil 124th in the world for ease of doing business. That number tells you just how much of a headache it can be to navigate the system.
Then you zoom out to the big picture, the macro economy, and there are some serious red flags. Analysts at Goldman Sachs have warned that a lot of the recent growth has been fueled by what they call fiscal steroids. In other words, a whole lot of unsustainable public spending. It might feel good in the short term, kind of like a sugar high, but it really undermines long-term stability.
And this Brazil cost isn't just some abstract idea for huge corporations. It affects people every single day. Just look at this comment from a visitor on Reddit. They point out that something as simple as buying medicine at a pharmacy can be harder and more expensive if you don't have a national ID number, a CPF, to get the discounts. It's a perfect little example of how everyday life gets tangled up in red tape.
And you hear stories like this all the time. For visitors, the language barrier can be pretty significant. For businesses, the tax system is an absolute maze of overlapping federal, state, and local rules. And for everyone, sadly, concerns about street crime and safety are still a persistent reality in the big cities.
So, this is the core conflict, right? You've got a country with these incredible natural and human assets on one side, and this massive wall of structural problems on the other. So, the billion-dollar question is, how can Brazil finally bridge that gap?
Now, one recent analysis laid out a pretty clear game plan. The strategy is all about leaning into Brazil's biggest strengths. It identifies 6 key moves: get more value out of agriculture and minerals, double down on the energy transition and tech innovation, and, this one's absolutely critical,
Invest a ton of money in infrastructure.
And that last point on infrastructure, it's a huge piece of the puzzle. I mean, you can't be a global powerhouse if you can't even move your own goods around efficiently. And the fact that only 18% of Brazil's roads are paved, that's about half the global average, that just shows you how big the gap really is. It's a core ingredient of that Custo Brazil.
But here's the twist. For a lot of business leaders, this massive problem is actually one of the country's greatest opportunities. Beto Abreu, who's the CEO of a huge manufacturer, put it this way. Yeah, the gap is big, but filling that gap presents an equally big opportunity for some really attractive returns on investment.
At the end of the day, though, making any of this happen is going to require a massive coordinated effort between the government and the private sector. The goal has to be to finally start tearing down those old roadblocks, simplify the tax code, lower trade barriers, and build the modern logistics network that the country so desperately needs to compete.
So all of this brings us to the bottom line. Brazil really is at a historic crossroads. With everything shifting in the world, the huge demand for clean energy, the need for new, reliable supply chains, it all plays directly to Brazil's strengths. The opportunity is very, very real.
But as the investor Pedro Passos wisely points out, just having advantages isn't enough. The real trick, he says, is to transform them into competitive advantage. It's not what you have, it's what you do with what you have. Those assets have to be put to work effectively.
And that, right there, leaves us with the ultimate question. Brazil has the natural resources, it has the clean energy, it has the talented people. But does it have the collective political will to make the tough choices needed to finally get out of its own way and unlock its own potential? This time, the whole world is watching to see if the country of the future is finally ready to arrive.